Mom,
Okay.
I can't come home for Christmas.
Mom, I can't come
Nurse
home for
cried on the
Christmas.
phone. Billionaire bought her a plane ticket. Beauty Annette pressed her back against the cold wall of the fourth-floor corridor, her scrubs still damp from rushing through the evening rounds. Her hands trembled as she stared at her phone screen, watching her mother's contact photo glow in the fluorescent hospital light. The December chill seeped through the window beside her, each gust of wind against the glass reminding her of home, of her mother's small kitchen filled with the warmth of homemade stew, the sound of carols playing softly on the old radio, and Christmas mornings that once felt untouchable by the world's harshness. At 28, Beauty had learned to compartmentalize heartbreak. She'd perfected the smile that convinced patients everything would be okay, mastered the steady voice that calmed families in their darkest hours. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of her brother's medical bills and her own exhaustion pressed against her chest like a physical presence, making it hard to breathe. She'd been calculating and recalculating for weeks, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. Every paycheck is carefully divided: rent, utilities, food, and the largest portion carved out for Daniel's treatment costs. The plane ticket home had been her one indulgence, her single act of hope. But life had other plans. The phone buzzed in her hand, and she knew it was her mother calling about Christmas arrangements. Beauty's throat tightened as she prepared to deliver the news that would break both their hearts. Beauty had been working at St. Catherine's Hospital for 5 years now, ever since she'd completed her nursing degree. The hospital staff knew her story well. The dedicated nurse who'd practically lived in these halls, picking up every extra shift available. Her colleagues in the ICU called her their anchor, the one who stayed calm when codes were called at 3 a.m., who remembered every patient's name and their family members' faces. Dr. Morrison, the attending who supervised her floor, often joked that Beauty ran on something other than sleep. Her friend and fellow nurse, Keisha, would slip her protein bars during their brief overlaps between shifts, worry etched into her knowing glances. They'd become her work family, but nothing could replace the ache she felt for her real one. Her mother, Margaret, had raised Beauty and Daniel alone after their father died in a construction accident when Beauty was 16. Christmas had always been their sacred time, their 3 days of healing. Margaret's tradition of decorating the tree together on Christmas Eve, the midnight service at the small chapel down the street, and Christmas morning breakfast that somehow tasted different than any other day of the year. These rituals had held their fractured family together. This would be the first Christmas they'd spend apart. Daniel's diagnosis had come like a thunderclap 8 months ago. Leukemia. The word had rewritten their entire lives in an instant. Beauty had immediately started working doubles, then triples when she could manage it. Every spare dollar funneled toward his treatment, toward keeping him alive, toward giving her mother one less thing to worry about in the small town where healthcare meant choosing between medications and groceries. The plane ticket had seemed possible a month ago. She'd been so close, just $200 away. Then Daniel needed an additional round of medication not covered by insurance. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. The cheapest flight she could find now was $950, and she had exactly $127.43 in her checking account. Money she couldn't touch because next week's rent was due. Mom's going to try to sound understanding, she whispered to herself, her badge, ironically labeled Emily, from the previous shift's mix-up she hadn't had time to fix, catching the light as her hand moved to wipe away tears that hadn't yet fallen. But I'll hear it in her voice. The disappointment, the worry that I'm sacrificing too much. Margaret had been planning for weeks, texting Beauty about whether she wanted her old room set up the same way, asking about her favorite dishes for Christmas dinner, sending photos of decorations from the attic. Each message had been a small knife of guilt, cutting deeper because Beauty hadn't found the courage to tell her the truth. The hospital PA system crackled overhead, announcing visiting hours were ending. Down the corridor, she could hear the soft beeping of monitors, the distant murmur of families saying goodnight to loved ones. the squeak of a custodial cart making evening rounds. This place that saved lives was simultaneously draining hers, one shift at a time. Beauty took a shaking breath and pressed the call button. It was time to break her mother's heart. Michael John had perfected the art of controlled distance. At 32, he'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing when to lean in and when to walk away. Tonight's hospital visit was supposed to be transactional. A 45-minute tour of the proposed cardiac wing, a handshake with the board, a check signed with his foundation's name embossed at the top. Clean, professional, done by 8. He'd been following Director Chun through the administrative corridors when he'd excused himself to take a call from Tokyo. The director had gestured vaguely toward the elevators and disappeared around a corner, leaving Michael alone in the hushed fourth-floor hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular institutional glow that made even healthy people look sick. That's when he saw her, a nurse in blue scrubs, pressed against the wall like she was trying to disappear into it. Her ID badge caught the light. Emily, it read, though something about the way she wore it seemed wrong, temporary. Her face was turned slightly away, but he could see her shoulders rising and falling with the kind of breathing that came before tears. Michael's instinct was to keep walking. He'd built his fortune on knowing which problems were his to solve and which weren't. Other people's private moments definitely fell into the latter category. But then she pressed the phone to her ear, and her voice cracked with a sound so raw it stopped him mid-step. "Mom? Hi. I know you're excited about Christmas, but I need to tell you something." The pause that followed was devastating. Michael watched her free hand grip the wall, knuckles white, as if the building itself was the only thing keeping her upright. "I can't come home." The words came out broken, each syllable a small death. "I'm so sorry. I tried everything, but the money for Daniel's treatment. Mom, please don't cry. Please." Her own tears were falling now, fast and silent, tracking down her face as she listened to whatever her mother was saying on the other end. Michael found himself frozen, witnessing something he had no right to see, unable to look away from such unfiltered grief. "The ticket was $950, Mom. I had it. I was so close." Beauty's voice dropped to barely a whisper, as if speaking quietly could somehow soften the blow. "But Daniel needed that extra round of medication. The one insurance wouldn't cover. You remember." Even from 15 feet away, Michael could hear the tinny sound of a woman's voice through the phone, thick with emotion, trying and failing to sound strong. Beauty pressed her palm against her forehead, her whole body curving inward like she was trying to protect herself from her own words. "No, Mom, don't say that. Don't tell me Daniel would understand. That's not the point. The point is I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be the one who holds everything together, and I can't even afford a plane ticket home." Her voice broke completely on the last word. She slid down the wall slightly, her scrubs bunching as she fought to stay upright, to maintain some shred of composure even as everything unraveled. "I know you planned everything. I know you already bought the ingredients for Dad's stuffing recipe. I know you told everyone at church I was coming." Each admission was another weight added to her shoulders. "Mom, please stop crying. If you cry, I can't." But she couldn't finish the sentence because she was crying too, one hand covering her mouth to muffle the sound. Years of practiced professional control finally shattering. "It's not about the ticket, Mom. You're right. It's about hope. And I can't buy that. I can't buy the look on your face when I walk through the door. I can't buy Daniel seeing us together, seeing that things can still be normal." Beauty's breath hitched. "I can't buy the feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything's going to be okay." Michael felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Recognition, not of her situation but of her isolation. Beauty ended the call with a whispered promise to try to video chat on Christmas morning, a hollow offering that satisfied no one. She stood there for a long moment, phone pressed against her chest, eyes closed, trying to rebuild the walls that had just crumbled. When she finally opened them, she seemed to notice the borrowed badge for the first time, reading Emily like it belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who had their life together. Someone who could afford to go home. She pushed off the wall, straightening her scrubs with trembling hands, wiping her face with her sleeve in quick, efficient movements. The transformation was remarkable, or would have been, if Michael hadn't just witnessed what lay beneath. She rolled her shoulders back, lifted her chin, preparing to return to the ward where people needed her to be whole, to be steady, to be the anchor everyone believed her to be. She'd taken maybe 3 steps when Michael cleared his throat. Beauty froze, her head snapping toward him. For a moment, they just stared at each other, her mascara-smudged eyes wide with mortification, his expression unreadable. She opened her mouth, probably to apologize or deflect or ask if he needed directions, but he spoke first.
I'm sorry.
I overheard your conversation. The color drained from her face. I didn't realize anyone was. She glanced down the corridor as if calculating escape routes. I should get back to my patients. Please wait. Michael stepped forward, one hand raised in a gesture meant to be reassuring rather than commanding. I'm not hospital administration.
I'm Michael John.
I'm here for a meeting about the cardiac wing expansion. Oh, she blinked, clearly not understanding why a donor would stop her. That's wonderful. The cardiac unit really needs your pain, he interrupted, the words coming out more blunt than he'd intended. It was genuine, real. I've spent the last 5 years surrounded by people who perform emotion for strategic advantage. He paused, searching for the right words. What you just said to your mother, about not being able to buy hope, I haven't heard anything that honest in longer than I can remember. Beauty stared at him, confusion and wariness flickering across her tear-stained face. I don't understand why you're telling me this. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look suddenly younger, less polished. Because in about 40 minutes, I'm supposed to finalize a 7-figure donation. Then I'll drive to my family's estate in Connecticut where my mother will seat me next to a senator's daughter. My brother will pitch me his 3rd startup this year, and my father will spend dinner discussing quarterly projections. He met her eyes. Every relationship is a transaction. Every conversation has an agenda. Even Christmas is just networking with better wine. That sounds lonely, Beauty said softly, the nurse in her responding to pain she recognized, even in unfamiliar packaging. It is. The admission seemed to surprise him. I was supposed to fly out tomorrow, but I've been inventing excuses to delay it. Board meetings, foundation obligations, anything to postpone another holiday of strategic alliances disguised as family time. He took a step closer, his voice dropping. So I need to understand something. What is the true cost of not being home? That ticket you can't afford. What does it actually buy? Beauty's breath caught. No one had asked her that. Everyone assumed they knew. Family time, tradition, obligation. But he was asking her to name the thing that made her chest feel like it was caving in. It buys the moment my mother stops pretending she's okay, Beauty whispered. It buys my brother seeing that I chose him, that his illness didn't make him a burden. It buys 3 days where my family isn't just surviving separately, but actually living together. She paused, her voice steadying with certainty. That ticket buys proof that love isn't just something we say. It's something we show up for, even when everything else falls apart. Michael nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. And you can't show up. No, she breathed. I can't. For a moment, they stood in shared silence. 2 people from completely different worlds, equally alone in the fluorescent hospital corridor. You think Christmas is about tradition, Beauty said suddenly, her voice gaining strength as something deeper than grief took over. But for families like mine, it's not a luxury. It's not about cookies and carols and nostalgia. She pressed her hand against her chest. It's a necessity. It's oxygen. Michael tilted his head, listening with an intensity that suggested he rarely gave anyone his full attention. When Daniel got diagnosed, everything stopped making sense. Every day became about scans and counts and percentages. My mother aged 10 years in 3 months. Beauty's words came faster now, urgent. Christmas isn't just a holiday for us. It's the one moment we can breathe. It's the day we remember what we're fighting for. It's proof that cancer doesn't get to take everything. She wiped at her eyes again, but this time with determination rather than defeat. My mother needs to see me walk through that door. Not because I bring presents or cook well or any of that. She needs to see that her children are still whole, that her family still exists as more than phone calls and worry. I'm supposed to be her anchor when everything feels like it's sinking. Michael stood very still, watching her transform from broken to fierce in the span of seconds. And without that anchor? He asked quietly. Without it, she's alone with her fear. Daniel sees his sister couldn't make it home, and he wonders if he's worth the sacrifice. And I. Beauty's voice cracked again. I work myself to exhaustion telling other people's families that everything will be fine, while my own family falls apart because I can't afford a plane ticket. Michael felt the weight of his own emptiness settle against her purpose. He had resources that could reshape hospitals, influence policy, move markets. And yet standing before him was a woman whose $950 problem held more meaning than anything he'd accomplished in years. You're right, he said finally. It's not a tradition. It's survival. Yes, she breathed. Exactly. Michael pulled his phone from his pocket, the movement so sudden that Beauty took a half step back. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, the same decisive energy he brought to board meetings and investment decisions. What are you doing? Beauty asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Where does your mother live? He didn't look up, already pulling up a travel booking app. I what? Mr. John, I wasn't asking you for. Michael, and I know you weren't asking. That's exactly why I'm doing this. His eyes flicked up to meet hers. Where? Millbrook. It's a small town about 40 miles outside of Columbus, Ohio. The words came out automatically, before her brain could catch up to what was happening. He typed rapidly, his expression focused. Closest major airport? Columbus. But please, you don't have to. When do you need to leave? Beauty's mouth opened and closed. My last shift ends tomorrow at 6. But Michael, this is too much. I can't accept. First class, open return. You'll fly out tomorrow night. Come back whenever your family doesn't need you anymore. He tapped the screen one final time, then looked up at her with something that might have been satisfaction. Done. Done? Beauty's voice came out strangled. What do you mean done? Michael turned his phone toward her, showing the confirmation screen. Flight 2847. Columbus. First class. Departure 7:45 p.m. The price tag made her stomach drop, over $2,000. I can't accept this, she said, even as hope blazed painful and bright in her chest. It's too much. You don't even know me. I know enough. Michael's voice softened. I know that in a building full of people performing their roles, you're the only person I've seen be completely, devastatingly real. I know your selflessness is the only thing that's felt genuine to me all season. He paused. And I know that ticket isn't charity. It's an investment in something I'd forgotten existed. People who love each other without transaction. Beauty's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled over again. But these were different. These carried relief, disbelief, wonder. I don't know what to say. Beauty's voice shook as she stared at the confirmation screen, then back at Michael. Thank you feels impossible and inadequate and... She pressed both hands to her face, shoulders trembling. You just gave me back Christmas. You gave me something too, Michael said quietly. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, then met her eyes with unexpected vulnerability. I've been running on autopilot for so long I forgot what it feels like to want something real, to need connection that isn't calculated. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I need to find a way to recenter my life, to remember what actually matters. Beauty lowered her hands, mascara smudged but her eyes bright. And you think I can help with that? I think, Michael said slowly, you remind me what Christmas is supposed to feel like, what family is supposed to feel like. Not a performance or an obligation, but actual survival, actual love. He glanced down the corridor, toward the elevator that would take him back to his meeting, his scheduled life. That's worth more than any donation I'll sign tonight. Michael, Beauty started, but he was already stepping back. Go call your mother, he said, a slight smile breaking through his serious expression. She's probably worried sick. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor, leaving Beauty standing alone with her phone and her miracle. Her hands shook as she pulled up her mother's contact. The phone rang once, twice. Beauty! Her mother's voice was thick, clearly still crying. Baby, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel worse. Mom! Beauty's voice broke with joy. Mom! Something happened. Something impossible. She laughed through her tears, the sound bright and disbelieving. I'm coming home. I'm coming home for Christmas. The sound her mother made, half sob, half prayer, was everything Beauty had been fighting for. Everything that ticket had bought. Tomorrow night, Beauty continued, unable to stop smiling. I land at 9:30. Can you pick me up? Of course. Of course. Her mother's voice strengthened with purpose. Oh, Beauty. How? What happened? Beauty looked down the empty corridor where Michael had disappeared. I think, she said softly, I just met my Christmas miracle. 24 hours later, Beauty stood in the arrivals terminal at Columbus Airport, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder, scanning the crowd for her mother's face. When their eyes met, everything else disappeared. Margaret moved first, half running despite her arthritis, arms already open. They collided in the middle of the terminal, holding each other so tightly that Beauty couldn't tell where her own heartbeat ended and her mother's began. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The embrace said everything. Relief, gratitude, love that survived distance and hardship and impossible circumstances. You're here, Margaret finally whispered against Beauty's hair. You're actually here. I'm here, Mom. The drive to Millbrook passed in a blur of conversation and tears and laughter. By the time they pulled into the driveway of the small house Beauty had grown up in, the weight that had been crushing her chest for months had lifted, replaced by something lighter. Hope, maybe, or just home. Christmas Eve unfolded in the familiar rhythm of tradition. Beauty and her mother moved around the cramped kitchen in practice synchrony, preparing her father's famous stuffing recipe, peeling potatoes, rolling out pie dough. The house smelled like sage and cinnamon, the old radio playing carols that Beauty had heard every December of her life. Tell me more about him, Margaret said, sliding a pan into the oven. This Michael. Beauty smiled, her hands dusted with flour. He said I reminded him what Christmas is supposed to feel like. What matters? She paused, thinking of that hospital corridor. Two lonely people finding unexpected connection. I think he was as lost as I was, Mom, just in a different way. And he just gave you the ticket? No strings. No strings. Just kindness. Beauty's voice softened with wonder. He said it wasn't charity, that it was an investment in something he'd forgotten existed. Margaret reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. People who give without expecting return, they're rare. They are, Beauty agreed, not yet knowing just how rare he would prove to be. Christmas morning arrived soft and golden, sunlight streaming through the frost-etched windows of the small living room. Beauty sat cross-legged on the floor in her father's old sweater, watching her mother arrange presents under the modest tree. The peace was profound, almost sacred, the kind of stillness that came from knowing everyone you loved was exactly where they needed to be. The doorbell rang. Beauty and Margaret exchanged confused glances. No one visited this early on Christmas morning. When Beauty opened the door, Michael John stood on the porch, dressed in a dark coat dusted with snow, holding a wrapped box and looking simultaneously confident and uncertain. Behind him, his breath formed clouds in the cold air. "Michael!" Beauty's voice came out startled. "What are you doing here?" "I was supposed to be in Connecticut right now," he said, a slight smile breaking through his serious expression. "Sitting through a 5-course meal where every conversation is a negotiation." He paused, meeting her eyes. "But I kept thinking about what you said, about Christmas being survival, about showing up for the people who matter." "So you drove to Ohio?" "I flew. Then I rented a car." He shifted the box in his hands. "Your story was my wake-up call, Beauty. I realized I've been surviving, not living, performing family instead of having one." His voice softened. "I wanted to see what real looks like." Margaret appeared behind Beauty, taking in the well-dressed stranger with wise, knowing eyes. "Mom," Beauty said, still stunned. "This is Michael John, the man who gave you your Christmas back." Margaret smiled, already opening the door wider. "Well, come in from the cold. We have plenty of food and clearly an extra place at our table." Michael stepped inside, and something in his posture relaxed, as if he'd been holding tension for years and finally found permission to let it go. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I can't remember the last time someone invited me somewhere without wanting something in return." "Then you've been spending time with the wrong people," Margaret said simply, taking his coat. Beauty set another plate. "We're about to show this man what Christmas is really supposed to feel like." As they moved toward the small dining room, Michael caught Beauty's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." She smiled, understanding completely. He'd given her a ticket home, but she'd given him something far more valuable, a place to belong.